night where Carlton have gone down to arch nemesis Collingwood by 5 points. Final scores: Carlton 12-11-83, Collingwood 13-10-88. Geez, it was rather grim, wasn't it? Extremely grim. Goal kickers for Carlton: Mitch McGovern with 3, Ben Ainsworth 2, Brodie Kemp 2, Matt Carroll 2, and 1 each to Harry Mackay, Francis Evans, and Will Haywood. Now, I just, for the life of me, I'm out of answers. I just watch it and I think to myself, is anything going to change? Because the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again. And unfortunately for this side, we lose in the same manner time and time again. We'll get on to the rest of the game in just a moment, but before we get any further, make sure you check out the Heatley Stand End on Instagram and TikTok. And don't forget, you can also check out all our content on the Heatley Stand End podcast YouTube channel. Make sure you stay up to date with all of that. But once again, we started the game fairly well, pretty even in the first quarter. We were down by a point, but then we put together another great performance in the second quarter and got out to a 14-point lead. Then even at three-quarter time, we led by 3 goals. And then the Pies, they just came at us in that final quarter. Now, you just always knew that they were going to come, and you knew that Nick Dacos was going to be the main player for the Pies to mount that comeback. Now, Dacos had 39 possessions this evening. Up till three-quarter time, he had 26. And in the final quarter, when you could see that Collingwood were going to mount a comeback and Dacos was going to play a key role in it, I would have thought it was on Michael Voss to tell a player such as maybe even Jagger Smith or a Zach Williams to go to Dacos. They started the quarter without a tag. Once they realised that they needed a tag on Dacos, Michael Voss moves Ollie Hollins onto Nick Dacos. What does Craig McRae do then? Well, he moves Nick Dacos down forward and creates a mismatch. And that matchup is a major red flag for us. David King says it on the Fox broadcast. And it's part of the reason why we lost. Now, I will say that the Taylor Byrne miss. So that's going to go down in Carlton folklore. If you recall round 2, 1993, it was the 4th of April, around about that time, Carlton playing Essendon, and Stephen Kernahan took a mark on the left half forward flank to the punt road end, the same end as Taylor Byrne was kicking in that final quarter after the siren. When Stephen Kernahan took the mark against the Bombers back in 1993, scores were level, 133 each of 2. Kernahan goes back, takes his shot, and kicks it out of bounds in the full. That kick remembered forever in Carlton folklore. Well, tonight's kick from Taylor Byrne after the siren, after he got a free kick 35 metres out, a slight angle, and he missed it to the left-hand side, which resulted in a minor score and left us 5 points in arrears. That kick from Taylor Byrne will be remembered as the kick that finished Michael Voss's coaching career. Make no mistake, It's the 16th of April, 2026, at 27 minutes past 10. Michael Voss is done as Carlton coach. Pack the bags, leave Icon Park. His tenure as Carlton coach is all over. It is completely untenable for Michael Voss to remain in the position of senior coach of the Carlton Football Club going forward. If I was in charge at the Carlton Football Club, you'd have to be asking questions about doing it now. There is nothing to gain from having Michael Voss coach out the rest of the season. We are now 1-5. Essentially, heading into the season, finals were beyond us. But right now, as we sit here tonight, finals are finished. Gone. There's not going to be any 2023 style turnaround for the team this year. So Michael Voss can't coach out the rest of the year. There's nothing to gain from that. All there is to gain is just stagnating the growth of young players who can't get a game. The Camporellis. How can they not get a game? It's just mind-boggling. It is mind-boggling. The decisions that are made, it's deflating. I am deflated, despite the fact that I didn't have high expectations heading into this season. And you think that's sort of going to temper your mood and help you get through these disappointing patches. But the problem is, as a supporter, you turn up week in, week out. You put your emotions into it week in, week out. And you get sucked into the vortex of supporting the Carlton Football Club. And right now, that vortex is causing hurt, anger, and frustration. We're all suffering. It's incredibly difficult at the moment to be a Carlton supporter. It's just mind-boggling, absolutely mind-boggling. Now, I just can't understand why, going back to the Nick Dacos tag, why you would send Ollie Hollands to Dacos. Ollie Hollands has never been able to prove himself as a run-with player. Now, I was speaking to a former Carlton midfielder whose brother may have left to go play up north. I was speaking to him last year, and he was at the club when Ollie Hollands was drafted. Now, I recall the conversation I had with Ed Curnow last year, and Ed told me that Ollie just he couldn't quite find his role within the Carlton side. Yes, sure, he'd shown many glimpses of determination and a competitiveness that is admirable for a wingman, but he just had something holding him back, whether it be disposal or a lack of speed or a lack of size, but he just couldn't quite cement his role in this Carlton football team. Now, what Ed told me was that he would have loved to have seen Ollie perhaps used as a run-with player, given him a role, something to really work at, something to really focus his football and really zoom in on. But unfortunately, Ollie isn't quite up to that role. And we saw that tonight when he goes to Nick Dacos, and Nick Dacos is just instrumental in Collingwood's comeback in the final term. Nick Dacos's final quarter was his 6th highest rated quarter of his career in his 100th game. Now, he's had a stellar 100 games, one of the best first 100 games you see from any player who's played our game over the last 150 years. His final quarter, 13 disposals, 5 kicks, 8 handballs. Kicked a goal, went at 70%. A lot of those disposals in the offensive half of the ground, 61 of them, in fact. He was involved in 5 scoring involvements and 2 goal assists. Instrumental. Just gave Ollie Hollands an absolute bath. Let's move on to Ollie Hollands' brother, Elijah Hollands. Now, I've been a defender of his throughout this year. As I mentioned in a previous episode, I'm involved in a Carlton supporter group, and there are many in that supporter group who just plain right disagreed with keeping Elijah Hollands on the list. They believe it sent a wrong message. They believe it rewarded bad behaviour and wasn't the type of decision that the club needed to go through, because it just totally went against any type of standards. Now, I differ with this opinion. I think that when you've got someone who has endured personal trauma and personal issues, I think redemption and forgiveness is something that should be afforded to people. And considering he's only 23 years of age, I thought he was definitely deserving of a second chance. And from all reports, and I went out to training many times over the preseason, and from all reports internally, he was exemplary over the preseason. On the field, he was fantastic. Like, he looked superb out on the ground. And then he was a little bit rusty in some of the practice games, but he hasn't really caught the world on fire. And tonight, he went through about 60% of the time on ground and had 1 disposal. Up until late in the final quarter, he hadn't touched the football. He ended up getting a kick. He had 1 kick for the evening, but his body language looked appalling. He looked disinterested, didn't want to be out there. And I'm so shocked that nothing was done about that. Well, let me rephrase that. I'm not shocked that something wasn't done about that. It's not surprising that the coach didn't have the foresight and the ability to just take him off the ground. I'm sorry, but when a player has not touched the football in 3 quarters plus the majority of the final term, how are you leaving him on the ground? What are you thinking by leaving him on the ground? How does he justify game time? And why are you leaving him out there to be a liability? Because tonight, Elijah Hollands was a liability for the Carlton Football Club. It's just ridiculous. It's staggering. Absolutely staggering. Now, I don't want to make any aspersions, and I don't want to sort of speak out of school here, but Tom Morris has put some intriguing footage of Elijah Hollands out on the ground. Now, I'll try to describe as best I can. So it's footage of Elijah Hollands running backwards into the deep forward line, and he puts his arms up and no one's around him. He's calling for the ball. Just doesn't look at all. It doesn't look aware of where he is on the ground. Doesn't look like he knows where to position himself. It just looks like he's a confused young man, and it's sad. It's incredibly sad to see what we saw tonight, because we know deep down that he's a good player. He has all the artillery. He has all the tools necessary to be a contributor to the Carlton Football Club. But tonight, it was just bizarre. I've never seen anything like that. The body language was way off. Something was not right. It was just incredibly strange to watch him out on the ground tonight. And that footage that Tom Morris has shared on his Twitter account now, it's footage from the crowd. So it's not from the TV broadcast, but it just looks incredibly bizarre. The stuff that you think to yourself, what the hell is he thinking out on the football field? Now, it just looks, it is bizarre footage. I'll put it on my socials, but it is bizarre footage. Now, as I said, I don't want to cast aspersions about why he might be behaving like that or the reason for it, but I've played a lot of footy for junior and senior clubs, and I have never seen players do what he was doing. It was just, I don't have an explanation for it. I'd love to see what Michael Voss says about it in his press conference, but I doubt he'll be able to give a answer that makes any sense. I think Voss will say that he wasn't aware or, really didn't see what he was doing. It just bizarre. I don't have any other words than that. Just, it's frustrating because you think, fuck, he could be such a good player. Like, he has the toolkit. He has the skill. And tonight was just, what the fuck? What the fuck indeed? Thinking to yourself, he's not even running where the ball is. He's running away from the contest, waving his hands around. Truly, truly worrying stuff. Now, three-quarter time, I just would love to know what the mentality is and what the conversation's like at three-quarter time, because to me, it seems either the direction from the coaches is poor, or the players just seize up and can't handle the pressure, and when it gets hot in the kitchen, they are unable to stave off the opposition. I love to say that it's a bit of both, but I really do believe, and I'm at the point, like, you do have to think that players need to be accountable. They need to be accountable for how they perform and the decisions they make on the field. But I think we've seen enough with this list and enough with the decisions made on game day. And as I mentioned before, the terrible decision to put Ollie Hollands and Nick Dacos, that the coach has to wear this. The coach has to be the person who takes full responsibility for coughing up these games. The coach is unable to see patterns evolving in the game, unable to stop run-ons, has no ability to move the magnets around and try to nullify opposition players who look like winning the game for them. The players, I've got no doubt they give 110%. I can't fault the players' endeavour. And for the most part, when they've been leading at half-time, they've been leading at three-quarter time, they've given themselves opportunities to win the game. I just don't think the coach has given the club opportunities to win the game. It's squarely on Michael Voss. It is all on Michael Voss. All on Michael Voss. It is just untenable. As I said earlier, it is untenable. A couple of weeks ago, I made these comments, but I'll make them again. You now will get to a juncture in the season, and that juncture is right now, 16th of April, 2026. Carlton sitting 1-5, and you can't make finals. So, as a club, Graham Wright, Chris Davies, they need to start planning for beyond this year. Now, does Michael Voss want to coach the team and plan for beyond this year? If he knows in his heart of hearts that he's not going to be here beyond 2026, why would he want to coach the club and set us up for beyond the time he's going to be here? No one wants to do that. He's going to want to coach for the now, try to win a few more games in the sunset of his coaching career. And to do that, he'll play senior players, keep the ones he doesn't like out. Jordan Boyd has been a Michael Voss scapegoat for the last 5 years. It is ridiculous that Jordan Boyd keeps going in and out of the side. I just can't understand how someone with the kicking ability that Jordan Boyd has keeps being used as a yo-yo in 1 week, out the other week, in 1 week, out the other week. To me, I just think as a player, you'd be fucking going radio rental. Last week, Jordan Boyd, he had 13 disposals. And he wasn't, I don't think he was disgraceful at all. I thought he was reasonably okay, and I thought his ball use was pretty good compared to a lot of our other players. He had 76% disposal efficiency. Only ones who had more than that. Nick Newman went at 94%. Brody Kemp went at 88% last week. Sam Walsh at 79%. Matthew Carroll at 76%. So Jordan Boyd, 1, 2, 3, 4. He's the 5th best player on the ground for Carlton for disposal efficiency. And what do? They drop him. And this has been a common thread where Michael Voss just refuses to play Jordan Boyd and uses him as a scapegoat for Carlton losses. And this goes back to my point. If you're going to coach for the future, you actually need to be picking a team that is going to take us beyond this year, not be picking a team where you want to make people scapegoats and pick players who are just not up to it. Unfortunately, Wade Dirksen, I was pretty bullish on him over the pre-season, but I don't think he's up to league standard. Unfortunately, he just doesn't have it. And Nick Haynes came in last week. It was magnificent. Took a number of intercept marks. He was pretty good tonight. I thought Haynes has acquitted himself well since coming back from injury. And he's been a great club in the last 2 years, Nick Haynes. It's been grim the last 2 years, but you can sort of say that Haynes has been a solid citizen for Carlton, and I'm happy that that has been the case for him because he seems like a ripping young man. Well, he's not young, he's over 30 now at the moment. Someone else who was really under the pump last week because he was suspended and missed the game against Adelaide for an indiscretion against North Melbourne, and that was Will Haywood. Now, I thought Haywood was very good tonight. Just any time he touched the ball, something happened. He created many opportunities, kicked a goal himself, and I thought, geez, that's the Will Haywood that we recruited from Sydney. The Will Haywood who just would run, gut run. He 294 metres gained, 4 inside 50s, 2 tackles, 1 goal assist, 7 scoring involvements, kicked a goal himself, 16 disposals, 75%. I can't fault Will Haywood's output tonight. I thought he played a game that you'd expect when you heard that Will Haywood was going to come to Carlton at the end of last year. So, geez. Where do you go from here, though? Like, okay, coach has to go. Ash Hansen needs to be given the reins. I don't think Ash Hansen is going to be a senior coach in waiting. So there's no issue with Ash Hansen coming in, being the caretaker for the rest of the year. It's not going to be a David Teague situation all over again where David Teague took over from Brendan Bolton and got us playing some good footy and really had the public wave of support that helped him get the job at the end of 2019. I don't think we're going to see a repeat of that from a caretaker, so I'd have no issue. Now, you have to go out and get the best available coach. Now, I don't necessarily subscribe to the theory that the best available coach needs to be an experienced coach. I don't think that Adam Simpson's the right man for the job. If you look at Adam Simpson's last few years at West Coast, how they fell off a cliff. We're getting smashed week in, week out, especially the last 2 years. Now, I know he was not the list manager. He was not in charge of regenerating the list, but some responsibility needs to fall on his shoulders. And unfortunately, at West Coast, the way it finished for Adam Simpson means that I don't want him coming anywhere near the Carlton Football Club, which is ironic because he's Michael Voss's mentor now. It's a part-time role. He mixes that with the role in the media. He mentors Michael Voss, not so much for strategy, but more so for leadership and to help communicate. And when I heard Adam Simpson say this 2 weeks ago, I thought to myself, why would you not tap into any strategic ideas he might also have? Why is it purely and simply a leadership role and a mentoring role for Michael Voss to become a better leader and a better coach? Michael Voss is a man who captained a football club to 3 premierships. I'm not too sure he requires a leadership mentor. I mean, it's great to have a mentor in life, but I think the most important thing for Michael Voss to have was someone in that coach's box who could provide a high level of tactical acumen. Everyone would always say that Ashley Hansen was someone who had a very good football brain, but why wouldn't you tap into Adam Simpson's? But just bizarre, that whole setup. crazy. Then you go to John Longmire. Now, the thing with John Longmire, and I think the thing with any human being, when you go through grand final losses, and, the last two for John Longmire were big ones, 10-goal drubbings against Geelong and Brisbane respectively. When you go through that, obviously you lose a bit of hunger and your drive is somewhat attacked. And just the way John Longmire finished at Sydney, you think to yourself, well, he seemed like he was burnt out. Now, that's not to say that he can't regain that spark, but what's to what's to not think that he might get burnt out again in another coaching job? This is a historical example, but Alan Jeans, the great St Kilda and Hawthorn coach, coached St Kilda to their first flag in 1966 and coached Hawthorn to a plethora of flags throughout the 80s. He became Richmond coach in 1993, and by that time, despite the fact that he had a great pedigree as a premiership coach, his coaching days were just finished and he didn't have the energy. And it's since come out from Cameron Schwab, I believe, who was the Richmond CEO in the early 90s, that Alan Jeans had confided in him that he had anxiety or some sort of anxiety disorder which was inhibiting him to coach the team. Now, by no means am I saying that John Longmire has got anxiety or anything like that, but when you suffer from burnout and then you remove yourself from a situation such as senior coaching like John Longmire has, it's going to be very difficult to have to get back in and reclaim that spark. So I don't think John Longmire is a man either. And then the other thing is you look at the stats for tried coaches, senior coaches who have won premierships going to their second club. The last person to be a senior coach, go to another club and win a premiership, or be a premiership coach, go to another club and win a premiership, was Mick Malthouse. It's a very difficult thing to do. Alistair Clarkson, well, he's a 4-time premiership coach. He's been finding it difficult at North Melbourne until this year. Paul Roos, he was a premiership coach. Now, different role at Melbourne, though. He had the sort of role building him from ground zero. Dennis Pagan, he was a premiership coach, came to Carlton and couldn't turn the place around. I think we need somebody who has... I mean, this is the thing. I think sometimes as supporters, but also as administrators, you can fall into the trap of wanting the most marketable option as your coach. Obviously, being a senior coach, it's a forward-facing role, a role that needs to speak to the media, a role that needs to sell the club. Now, at the time when we were hiring for Michael Voss's job, obviously it's well known that Luke Sayers, the former president, wanted Ross Lyon. There were elements on that board who were against hiring Ross Lyon. Ross Lyon also didn't want to go through a process, and I don't blame him. When you're a coach such as Ross Lyon, who had coached St Kilda to grand finals, had coached Fremantle to a grand final in 2013, your football resume is on display. So why would you need to go through a process to try to win a president and his board over? So I agree the fact that Ross Lyon didn't want to go through a process. There was no need for him to go through a process. If the board at the time deemed that he was the best person for the job, just give him the job. Just give him the job. But he lost out. Adam Kingsley was also on the market, but I think Adam Kingsley, at that point in time, untried coach, was probably not seen as a marketable option. So the marketable option that Luke Sayers then decided to pursue was Michael Voss. So you can't fall into the trap of going for the marketable option. That's all well and good, but once again, we always talk about this. The main function, the core business of a football club is to win football games, not to sell itself or get involved in social issues. It's to win football games. So forget about who's going to be the best marketer. Forget about who's going to be the best face of the football club. I think the next coach at Carlton, the race is down to two people. The first is Hayden Skipworth, an unheralded player from the Adelaide Crows who served his time as a assistant coach. And I think it's time that he was given an opportunity at senior level. The second person I'll be looking at is former Geelong and Carlton player. Very no frills about the way he played the game. No frills about the way he goes about his coaching. Spent many years at Hawthorn. Was at West Coast. That person is Adrian Hickmott. Adrian Hickmott, despite the fact that he'd be a rookie senior coach, he's 50 years old. Like, he has the maturity to be able to handle the job. So I would be looking at Hayden Skipworth and Adrian Hickmott as my two preferred candidates to take over from Michael Voss in 2027. Now, a few other things before we wrap up. Make sure you head to the socials, the Heatley Stand In on Instagram and on TikTok. We post all our highlights on there. You can also check us out on YouTube. That is the Heatley Stand End podcast. Make sure you check us out. All our content goes there and you can catch up on anything you want there. Now, Taylor Byrne, I hope they get around him. I hope they actually support him because I see a lot of potential in the young small forward. He's got a lot of excitement. He's got a lot of energy, and I believe that he's somebody that can have a long and fruitful career at the Carlton Football Club. But unfortunately, he missed a shot to level the game after the siren. But really, I hope the senior players are going to him and getting him around him and making him feel better and valued in that Carlton team. Cripps, well, I don't know. How do you assess his game? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave us a comment on the Heatley Stand on Instagram and TikTok. But the game of Patrick Cripps, interested to see where you rank it. 25 possessions, 11 contested possessions, 72% disposal efficiency. Final quarter, 10 disposals at 60%. I mean, he's been a champion of the club, but you've got to be better than that. 60%. That's not good enough if you're wanting to win a game of football in the final quarter. Zach Williams, 26 disposals. Now, I think he deserves some kudos. I think Zach Williams, he spent a lot of time in the defensive half. He spent a bit of time in the centre bounces, he attended 3 centre bounces, which I like that. That's something that we saw last week in place of George Hewitt. But I like the fact that they're using Zach Williams as a bit of a different avenue in the midfield. 361 metres gained. And the most impressive thing here is disposal efficiency at 85%. So not too many wasted opportunities when Zach Williams had ball in hand. 26 disposals, 9 contested, 17 kicks, 9 handballs. I think he can hold his head up high. Others who I think should be able to hold their head up high, Ollie Florent, as mentioned before, Will Haywood, Ben Ainsworth. Now, he deserves a big shout out, Ben Ainsworth does. I don't think he's put a step wrong in this season so far. Kicked 2 goals tonight. Looks like he just wants to create opportunity after opportunity for the Blues. And he knows where the goals are. And I think he has been a big positive for Carlton in 2026. Mitch McGovern, a man who was on essentially the football scrap heap at the end of last year, he can hold his head up high. Nick Newman, since coming back from his long-term injury, he can also hold his head up high too. There was an interesting interview I heard Nick Newman on SEN yesterday on their drive show with Andrew Marr and Andrew Gaze. And the question from, I think it might have been Gazy, I'm not too sure, but you can go back, have a listen to it. It'll be available on SEN's podcast catches and wherever they put all their stuff. But he was asked whether the club lent into the whole build-up between Carlton and Collingwood and the rivalry. And the answer that you got from Nick Newman was a bit so-so, a bit vanilla. He pretty much said that, no, it's just another 4-point game and we don't really look too far into the rivalry and just build up like it's any other game. If you put that in contrast with Collingwood were able to... If you put that in contrast with Collingwood had Eddie Maguire come and speak to the playing group this week about the history and the importance and the relevance of the Carlton-Collingwood rivalry. So here you got, on one hand, a club who refuses to lean into it and publicly, in a media sense, just saying it's another game worth 4 points. And on the other hand, you've got a club who are really leaning into the rivalry and helping their players get motivated and get fired up to play their arch enemy. Why are clubs scared to lean into things such as rivalries? Like Craig McRae clearly isn't. Craig McRae clearly allows his players to play with expression, allows his players to play with emotion, whereas, just trying to play something down, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. I would much prefer the club to play into the rivalry. Use it as a bit of fire. Use it as motivation. Now, they shouldn't be needing that to motivate themselves in the first place, but some extra motivation wouldn't have gone astray. Anyway, let me know what you think. Hately Stand Den, Instagram and TikTok. Now, I think until next week, unfortunately, it's just a difficult time to be a Carlton supporter, but until next week, it's go Baggers. Talk to your friends this week, check in with them, make sure you're all supporting each other, get around each other. It hopefully won't be like this for a long time to come. Hopefully the wheels start to turn and we can maybe pinch a win or two down the track, but don't give up. It always feels like it's easy to give up, doesn't it? But I'm always the opinion that eventually when success does come, it's going to be a hell of a lot sweeter. a hell of a lot sweeter because of all the hardship and all the disappointment that we've had to endure for such a long time.